there's not really a good place to start talking about this movie, and it's kind of tough to really just talk about the movie just on its own. So the movie started out really as a novel by Joyce Carol Oates, who was writing a fictional account of Marilyn Monroe. She said she did that because the amount she looked into Monroe's life, everything was so hidden and kept under wraps, but everything also was incredibly tragic. So the only way to really get at it is to kind of take the famous things we know about her and to kind of show in some type of storification what might have been going on behind the scenes. So that's kind of the genesis of the movie, is the book, and the book apparently is even more depressing than the movie is. But the point of the whole project from the beginning seems to be much more about looking at celebrity and looking at identity through one of America's most cherished icons. And there is a real bifurcation of the Monroe character because on one side, obviously there's glitz and glamour and elegance, and you can also tell that there's a huge amount of sadness and unhappiness going on beneath the surface of that character. And I would say going into this, if you have not seen the movie, it is a very tough movie. I think that it is supposed to be tough. I think it is meant to be tough. And I think that it makes more sense to think of this as a horror movie than it is a biopic. It's not a biopic. In the same way, if you've seen Assassination of Jesse James, it kind of comes at you with this feeling of being a Western when it is really not. It's a portrait of Jesse James as someone who is struggling with this idea of this monumental persona that's kind of been put on him throughout the years, and kind of how he's able to square living a life with that. This does the exact same thing, but instead of obviously being a Western, this comes at it much more as a horror movie looking at celebrity. One of the best sequences in it is whenever Norma Jean is having a difficult time kind of getting she says the Monroe persona really to come out. She really sees this as a mask that she has to wear. And everything, and one of her assistants that's with her on all of her projects comes to her aid, and there's a moment where the camera dollies in on her and you can see this character come to life in what feels like a possession. It's very creepy, it's very scary. And the thing is, there's a lot of stuff that I would say is wrong with the movie. It's not a perfect movie. I think his previous movie, Assassination of Jesse James, is pretty much a perfect movie. This one isn't. I think that it does focus too much on the tragedy. A lot of people have talked about that. I'll get to that in a second. I think that if he had stuck more with a narrative, given more of a narrative, like 15% more of a narrative, more of the crisis of celebrity, the crisis of identity, I think it would have felt more like a movie. Without that narrative spine, it feels much more like an art film, which is fine. I enjoy art films, but this movie now, because it doesn't have the narrative going through it, it is much more of just a mood piece. But that kind of brings to the point that everyone is getting so upset about with this movie. I think that you either fall into two camps. You're either in the camp of saying that this movie shows exploitation and calls out an industry that essentially used a woman in order to just profit off of her image and did not care about her well-being in any way, shape, or form, to the point that she ended up actually committing suicide. Or you fall into the category of saying that this movie actually exploits her and does what everyone did to her beforehand. I personally do not think that this movie is exploiting her, because going into the movie, knowing that this is going to be a very disturbing portrait of a life that was tortured, the movie giving what it is essentially saying it's going to deliver on, making it a difficult, disturbing experience, I think also gives sympathy for the character. I do not think anyone is leaving this movie, or is meant to be leaving this movie, feeling happy or positive about anything that's going on. If anything, and this kind of fits in a lot with Dahmer, which is on Netflix right now and is, I think, in the top 10 on Netflix right now, where you are showing terrible things happen in a way that is kind of showing red flags, whether it's in personality or whether it's in industries, as a way to kind of show that there is exploitation out there, there's a lot of danger out there, there's a lot of evil out there. Like, this movie is in a lot of ways creating a feeling of hell, I think, to show that there are terrible, dark places in the world that exist, that people have gone through, and it can be very difficult to see what they're like. It can be very difficult to understand the pain that is in certain parts of the world. And not a lot of movies go to the point where they're actually going to show you what that might be like, what that might feel like. And it's difficult. I understand that it is murky ground with this character. I think the thing I'm disappointed in what the discourse has been for the movie is that there are hundreds of interesting conversations you could have about this movie, and I think that it's disappointing that it has just stuck in the vein of, well, this is exploiting Marilyn Monroe, because I don't think it is, and I think that the fact that you sympathize, you feel bad for this character shows that the movie is not actually exploiting her. I think that if it was, then there would be an air of excitement and fun about this movie, which there isn't. No one is supposed to leave this movie feeling good. I think that's the point of it. That's not for everyone. I would not recommend this to someone unless I knew that that was the type of thing that they are okay experiencing in any piece of art. And not everyone is, so I understand that. But that's what I have for Blonde. Leave your thoughts below on what you thought of the movie. Do you think that it is exploitative? Or do you think it is, as the female author of the book said, one of the most feminist films she has ever seen, especially from a male director?